was not that bad.
All views expressed by the hosts and guests in this podcast are solely their opinions and do not reflect the opinions of their respective employers. Guests and hosts may maintain positions in the assets discussed in this podcast. This podcast is for informational purposes only, and nothing in the podcast is intended to be financial, legal, or even life advice. All right, guys, welcome back to today's pod. Thanks for tuning in. In this week's episode, we have Matty from Legion. So right off the bat, where are we finding you from, Matt?
I'm in London.
Got it. So for context, right, I think recently Legion has made a lot of noise in the crypto Twitter timeline in the past couple of weeks. We've been hearing sort of like this new project that is going to change the way that funding is going to be conducted in our space. And that's why we wanted to talk with you. And to start, I just would love to listen a bit more about your background for our audience. Who are you? How did you get into the space and all of that?
Yeah, appreciate the question. So I've been in Web3 full-time for a number of years now, mostly in token design, parameter optimization, mechanism design type roles, most notably for the Stacks Foundation, Bitcoin Layer 2, top 50 project by market cap, and then also Status, one of the earliest and largest ICOs in Ethereum, S&T token. Prior to that, my background goes back to TradFi, was an algorithmic trader at Bridgewater Associates, Ray Dalio's hedge fund, and then also a data scientist and machine learning founder in the Web2 space, dealing with modeling, predictive algorithms, these sorts of aspects. And so that's how I kind of naturally fell into mechanism design. Was finance knowledge, modeling knowledge, interest in crypto. Been investing through the ICO craze of 2017, some of my most favorite memories, and that kind of led to where I am today.
A bunch of crazy times for sure.
Yep.
Was there any particular moment that made you decide that you actually want to work in crypto? Because as you just explained, you had a great credential, great background, great job back then. Like, what made the leap into joining this crazy space, I guess?
Yeah, well, actually, my Web2 startup at the time, we were in talks to sell off the software that we had written and developed. And I didn't have an exact thing to do next. And I just started kind of showing up in the discords of projects I was interested in to begin with, and just leaving comments, getting involved, saying, hey, why are you doing things this way? And that kind of just naturally led to the Stacks Foundation saying, look, you're already adding a ton of value to projects in our ecosystem. Why don't you do this more full time? And I was doing that because I had actually invested in Stacks' ICO back in the day.
Right.
Personally, why I'm a big believer in this ICO model. I was in that ecosystem and just passionate about helping out, largely because years ago I participated in their ICO.
Got it. So you were one of those guys that every project founders were a little bit scared if they're asking questions on Discord, if they're asking critical questions. But yeah. I get it. So I myself was also got into the space around 2017, so part of the ICO class. Unfortunately, gave back 98% of my unrealized profits, just like most people back then.
Round
but
it, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm particularly excited to speak to you about this because ever since then we've seen a form of ICOs through centralized exchanges, IOs, and then we had seen some IDOs and some other more, I guess, AngelList leaning, folks like CoinList and a bunch of others are trying to see if they can make a comeback. Sort of make the ICO renaissance, right? I guess this next question leads to what's the inspiration or the motivation behind you creating Legion, and what sort of opportunities that you feel you have to sort of execute on this idea right now?
Yeah, so for me, the inspiration, I guess, is maybe different than the why now timing wise, but let's talk about the inspiration first. The inspiration is, as I mentioned, I have myself, participated in ICOs back in the day, and those were the projects at the time I was most bullish on, at least the ones I actually held, right? And those ended up being the projects that I was a long time community member of. Go to the Discords, ask questions, add value how I can, participate in governance, right? And so I think there is, when done correctly, when you, in theory, at least align incentives so that there's kind of this longer term double opt-in rather than just short-term kind of token flipping behavior, I would argue ICOs are the vastly better mechanism for distributing tokens to a broad set of value-add users. And if you look at the typical mechanism that's used today of airdrops, all the data suggests that airdrops are abysmal at user retention, right,
Yeah.
and token holder retention. So I think ICOs are the better mechanism. And then why now is a bit of just a personal, like I've been working in this space for a number of years, have focused on token design, written a whole guide called Tokenomics for Builders that's open source, that's got great reviews. But the last missing piece is kind of rubber meets the road distributing that token to people once it's live. And so that's a bit personal why now. And then the overall why now is also that you have MiCA regulation, markets and crypto assets, coming out in the EU, which is going to now, for the first time in kind of a major jurisdiction, lay out this unambiguous, there's no legal gray area of how you do public token offerings. And so under MiCA, you can offer tokens to what they call non-qualified investors, which is roughly the equivalent of the US's non-accredited investor term. So retail people can now participate in public token offerings.
Got it. No. Yeah, that's interesting because just to quickly recap what you were saying, the regulatory landscape is a lot more clear these days compared to 2017 until,
Yep.
I guess, until 2021. So, okay, now, yeah, it makes sense that now you feel sort of like everything sort of like falls into place, and this is sort of like your next move now, given your experience writing the tokenomics guide and like all of that. So let's buzz right into, again, for the uninitiated listener, what is Legion and how can they participate?
Yeah, so Legion is a platform for liquid token sales, ICOs, TGEs, and pre-liquid rounds. So purchasing tokens, on a SAF type of mechanism before they're actually liquid. And we let retail investors invest in these early stage projects. The idea being that projects they're seeing the value of having community. And so they're forming capital from these people so they can add value in ways that VCs can't, right? You see these, time after time, you see these low float, high FDV launches disappoint. I think one thing people forget is that founders themselves or team members themselves, like their tokens vest a long time, right? And so if the token's down only after launch, like even they aren't benefiting from doing this. It's really just a handful of very large, VCs or insiders. And so the smartest teams, the smartest investors are waking up to the fact that for long-term success of the project, it actually helps tremendously to have organic users, a passionate value, a value-aligned community. So ICOs are the best way to do that, I would argue. And so that's kind of why we're passionate about this and what Legion does. It allows projects to raise from their set of value-add investors and screen those investors based on reputation. So that leads to what you've probably seen all over Twitter, all over X these days, right? Legion Score. That's our reputation system where every investor who signs up to the platform gets scored across their on-chain activity, their developer activity, their social activity. And it's much more than just, you have more followers, your score is higher. It's more indexed on quality than quantity. And the idea here is that projects can now say, maybe it's useful for us to have developers from the Solana ecosystem, right? And so we can offer a discount to people who meet those criteria or whitelist only those people. That's the core concept.
Got it. Right off the bat, I'm wondering, what would you say to people that, perhaps they're not super active on social media, but they want to participate, right? Because it means that most likely, unless they're like a very famous person, their Legion score might be lower. What do you have to say about that, I guess?
Yeah, it's a great question because there's always a balance, right? If you don't have some sort of filtering or investor quality control, if you will, then what you inevitably are going to have is just lots of bots, lots of Sybils, right? Lots of people that maybe just buy the token and dump. And so that's actually ironically going to lead to projects saying, you know what? I'd rather not do this. I'd rather keep raising from only very few angels and only VCs because it's not a positive ROI for me to raise from that set of anonymous, truly anonymous wallets.
Right.
But when you have pseudonymous wallets, right, and you have reputation, then you can have an effective balance, a trade-off where yes, maybe there's some privacy constraints, like you're sacrificing. Okay, people can see my handle. We've built out Legion, so privacy is first and foremost. Like just because you connect a wallet doesn't mean anyone else can see that, let alone us. Your handles you can customize, but obviously the platform is aware that lives, that your social handle lives in a database, even though your wallets are salted and hashed. So there is some trade-off, but even if you don't have a big social presence, what teams do and what we would encourage is, you could customize max allocation. So everyone who passes KYC, who has some baseline metrics, right, can invest maybe 2,000 or 5,000. But if you have certain achievements, a higher Legion score, you can invest maybe 10,000, 20,000. So that's kind of the thought process is anyone can get access, but that's slightly different than everyone getting access. Because again, if you go to the everyone route, you're going to be including bots, you're going to be including Sybils. The incentives just simply don't work. And for this to work, you have to make the incentive for the team, the incentive for the VC investors, and the incentive for the community all to make sense to do this. Otherwise, somebody's going to opt out and it falls apart.
Right, right. No, that makes sense. And also that's why you have, of course, you need to have KYC and like all of that. So at least there's different sets of barometers that founders can choose, if they want more pseudonymous founders, as you said so, but have, for instance, like much higher wallet quality scores, maybe because they have been through multiple cycles and their wallet shows that they're a very experienced, like on-chain person, even though they're like semi-anonymous. As long as they're KYC'd on your system, that can still work to the benefit of both the investors and the founders, right?
Exactly, yeah. And I think there will always be a place, sure, for the non-KYC route, the like kind of explicitly, fly in the face of regulation. But more and more teams, especially those that can raise from VCs, don't want to take on unnecessary legal risks, right? Like why raise and then just turn around and pay a bunch of lawyers to defend yourself, right? So a lot of teams are looking for this viable option where you're at least abiding by anti-money laundering rules, right? Which can get you in not just civil, but criminal proceedings. So you don't want to mess around with those things.
For sure, for sure. Can you talk a bit more about, I guess, the sale mechanism? Is it a normal auction? Is it a fixed price? How would it look like?
Yeah, so that's a great question. It's also customizable by the team, depends on their circumstance. So we do both pre-liquid token sales, so like a SAF, that's going to be generally just by nature more a fixed price type of sale generally. But we also do liquid token sales, so more like an ICO. And that we have audited already smart contracts in both EVM and SVM for Solana, fixed price as well as a clearing price auction. A clearing price auction is similar to a Dutch auction with some additional benefits. In super quick terms, what you do is everyone bids a price and a quantity of tokens they want to buy. You rank the bids high to low in price, and you go down the list and you're basically like allocating tokens, and at some point you run out of supply, like all the supply is spoken for, and that price is the price everyone pays. So it's the price that clears the auction. And so it's a pretty simple mechanism. There's benefits over like a Dutch auction where people can just FOMO in and not really understand the mechanism. You kind of know what you're paying, you know the FTV you're paying before and everyone it's incentive compatible mechanism, meaning everyone is logically going to bid what they think is the fair value. It's illogical to bid higher than what you think is the fair value.
Got it. That's interesting. So that's the sale mechanism. I want to move on to how do you think about, I was briefly looking at your white paper and you sort of like had a couple thoughts on what post-investment management look like, right? And maybe perhaps as somebody who's invested in a lot of projects before, how would you, I guess, like plan to help the projects that are using Legion to be able to get more out of their, let's say like hundreds of investors that are putting in a smaller amount of money? Are you thinking of like creating like an additional tool, or like as soon as the funding ends, that's it? You have to go on their separate ways and make their own Telegram. Like what's the thinking there?
Yeah, so we're definitely working with projects to help them leverage that community they just sold tokens to. That could be anything as simple as a native way for them to join the Discord and the existing Telegram from Legion now that they completed the flow, to larger kind of custom initiatives that we're kind of have in the works with some of these projects. I think at a bare minimum, yes, you want these people obviously in your Discord kind of evangelizing, right, the product and giving product feedback at scale. Like these are the sorts of benefits that even the best VCs, they just cannot and wouldn't, it doesn't make sense for a VC. Like a VC is going to be a handful of people. They're not going to be able to test your app and give you a bunch of feedback from a bunch of different perspectives. So those sorts of value adds are definitely like bare minimum. And one of the aspects that is also part of Legion score, your reputation, is this aspect of accountability. So founders can actually rate investors or token purchasers based on kind of their behaviors. Maybe I promised you, right, I would make a bunch of introductions and that's why you gave me some allocation. Right. And then I don't do anything. All I do is show up in the Discord and ask when token. Well, there's now accountability where I can get, effectively my reputation can get slashed, meaning I lose out on future opportunities. And the fact I know that means that I'm incentivized not only to act better for future opportunities, but I should act better now, because if I misbehave now, I'm losing out on future opportunities. So the incentives actually change from a like launchpad type of model where it's like, oh, just buy and dump every token, to wait a minute, actually if I do that, I'm going to very quickly get slashed. So I should actually buy into the projects I support and care about longer term and just focus my bets and focus my time more on those projects.
Which aspect you think is more challenging in managing a project like Legion? Is it the supply or the demand side? As in, like, is it going to be more of a challenge for you to find an interesting project that wants to list, or finding the angel investors?
Yeah, that's also a really good question, because we are a two-sided marketplace, like a lot of businesses. It's been very promising to see the supply side come out. I think a lot of smart founders these days are waking up to, if we don't have a community, if we don't make a meaningful effort to involve people, then we're just going to be down only. We're going to be capital rich maybe from all the VC money, but community poor. And so I would say it's maybe surprisingly optimistic so far of like how the projects we've reached to, the familiar names, the large names. Can't drop anything specific yet, but right. more news will be coming soon as we do the first launches. So that has been awesome, actually, and I think that's more like referral and direct sales type of outreach. So I think that's actually maybe paradoxically or unintuitively the easier part, and then it's reaching the long tail of retail investors is arguably the harder piece. I mean, we opened up signups just a couple weeks ago and already have over 13,000 people signed up. So it's been great, but we've got to keep pushing, keep scaling, and then hopefully as Bitcoin hits 100K within the next couple of months, it seems, there'll be a whole new wave of new people, new purchasers coming in and helping them navigate a little bit different than the 2017 Wild West, right? Like navigating, here's what a good project looks like, here's how evaluate things, here's best practices, here's how you can help projects. I think that's a perfect position for Legion to be in moving into 2025.
Got it. I want to take a step back and go back to what we discussed earlier with regards to like these high FDV, low float launches. I'm wondering if you have an opinion if that is more, is it an issue of valuation, or is it an issue of the funding model, right? Like, because I think one of your argument is if we have a more fair fundraising mechanism in which it's not just a few entities, insiders that can participate, that should help with that. Curious if you mind like elaborating a bit more about how you see both sides of the dynamics.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think there's maybe two things. One is the driving up the valuation in the first place. When you have these days, quite a lot of VCs that just have a ton of capital to deploy, and they've got to put it somewhere, right? And so if you're largely not caring about who you're raising money from and just trying to maximize the valuation, like you can do that and you can raise tremendous amount of money, because the way VC rounds work is largely the highest bidder wins, right? Whoever happens to overpay will win the round. A more intentional approach about who are we raising from. and that includes the community, right, and making outreaches to them of raising at reasonable valuations, then I would argue you get less of a bloat in the valuation in the first place. And that's especially true if you're including, the community in early rounds, right? So you have this spread right from the get-go. You have fewer very large holders that can kind of dictate the launch price and drive the valuation. So that's one piece. And then the other piece is actually sustaining a valuation once you launch. And I think that also speaks to Legion's value prop of you now have this token spread out amongst a bunch of people. They have bought into the project. They are here to support the project. So you have actual community and users and product evangelists. Of course, that doesn't guarantee that the valuation is going to be upheld or that the token will go up or anything like that. But it gives you I would argue, a much better shot at that. Whereas if you just raise from the highest valuation from a few VCs and then launch, we've seen what that usually leads to.
Got it. Other than Ethereum, what do you think is the most successful ICO so far?
Yeah, I mean, Chainlink, Ethereum, Solana. There's been a few of these bigger projects, and one of the crazy things is when this is in our white paper, right? But like when you look at the valuations of what those were done at compared to kind of the average valuation of project launching on some of these launchpads out there today, it's like they're 10 times higher today. So for the average project, right? And those were like amazing projects back in the day. So I think there's a few cases of big wins, and then you have to recognize that by nature, this is going to be aspect of most projects, maybe aren't big wins, and a few of them are very, very big, payoffs like Solana, like Ethereum, like Chainlink.
Got it. I promise this is the last kind of hard question that I would ask, but I would be remiss if I didn't ask this. But
of course,
I guess, how do you see you compete with the exchanges launchpad? Because like right now, that seems to be like, at least for the tier one exchanges, that's the dream for most projects because they know they can potentially get listed. So it seems to be like a fairly tough competition. I would love to hear how you think about the dynamic. Also, like, do you see them as like an indirect competitor in some sense at different stages? How would you frame it?
Yeah, I think they have slightly different, by nature of their business model, they're going to optimize for something slightly different, right? They're optimizing for trading volumes because that largely drives their revenue. And so when they have these launchpad arms, that's largely to launch a token that will now bring in additional people who will trade it, which is slightly different than saying to the project, our value proposition is you can reach the right people to own your token as you determine it, right? And here's all these metrics, and here's all this reputation, and here's all this data to back that up. So I think there's a slight different value proposition where we're more directly focused on what the project needs in terms of distributing that token. Now, you could argue, the perk of getting onto the tier one SEX is worth that, the exchange. But I think it's about, having another credible alternative. You've seen projects raised from multiple platforms in the past, right? So I don't think it's going to be like only one thing that every project goes with. And I think, as we've also talked about, has also been a bit in the narrative, some of these sexes are charging quite egregious, listing fees, right? And I think to have a credible alternative to that really does require a project to have momentum and negotiation leverage of saying, look, I've got all these users, they will trade my token if you list me, so don't charge me, 10% of my supply to list me.
Yep.
And that goes back to distributing your token in the first place, right? And having liquidity spread out and amongst many people who would be trading the token. So I think from reaching the project of what they most need, and then also giving them a credible alternative to, launching the token, and then also leverage for listing the token. That's kind of where Legion distinguishes itself.
You just made a very interesting point there, and it aligns with what you said earlier about how what might be more challenging in your next focus is to find the long tail retail investors. Because, it's not a secret anymore that CX does look at the number of users, right? And that's why we've been seeing a rise in ton adjacent projects getting listed, because it's an entirely new cohort of KYC users that are going to onboard on those CX. And all of the power users, like those of us who are on crypto Twitter, are definitely going to try your products. But if you can get more of the, not not like core CT people, but they would
Yep.
want to participate, then yeah, then you can really help the projects who are on your platform, because they can say, hey, I have like 7,000 KYC angel investors or something like that. That would be like an amazing number for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, so is there any future updates that we should look forward to? Anything that you want to pass on to the audience?
Yeah. I mean, I think there'll be some sales coming sooner than you might think. Some big names. So I'm excited to bring those to market. And obviously, there's regulations we have to abide by. So not everyone necessarily around the world can participate, but we're taking the path of within regulation, providing as broad access as possible, even leaning into these brand new regulations, right, that are coming out. So that's what we're optimizing for, of allowing anyone who shows up, who hustles, who grinds, to invest. Not everyone. We don't want bots. We don't want Sybils. If you show up and you don't have any history, sure, you can get involved maybe at the start with a small allocation, but like it doesn't make sense for you to be getting as much allocation
Yeah.
as someone who's going to add a bunch of value. So that's kind of what we're working on. The Legion Score reputation system, you can sign up for that regardless of where you are, generate your score, have fun, show up with the leaderboard, access, reputation gated channels. So we'll be doing a bunch of more around that in the future. So even if you can't invest on the platform, there's that product that you can use, the Legion Score. And then we're going to be, scaling that up and improving that over time. Like, this is the worst the Legion Score will ever be. It's only up from here. Factoring in additional integrations, additional data. So we would love to see Legion Score become this this future kind of underpinning across DeFi that you see, of people asking, "What's your Legion Score?" As as kind of your street cred. So
Yeah, it's
that's
gonna be.
probably a good closing note from me, of like excited for the future on that.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of alpha there. So if you're listening to this and you haven't gotten your Legion score yet, you should absolutely go to like Legion's Twitter and yeah, start the process there. I want to
Definitely.
end this with just a very simple rapid fire question that we ask every guest. If you can be fast, that's great. But if not, also like it's completely fine.
All
But
right, I'll
yeah,
do my
these are just
best.
fun. Yeah, these are just fun questions. The first one is the most simple. Just what is one piece of, I guess, content? It can be like an essay, a YouTube video, a book that every aspiring investor should read or watch.
So this is going to sound full of myself, but I would say my book, Tokenomics for Builders, because I
I love it.
spent
I love it.
so much time aggregating into
Always
that
be
book
shilling.
all these resources. So it's got a bunch of links in it. Check it out. It's open source. It's free. Tokenomics for Builders.
Got it. Got it. Awesome. What is your biggest investment mistake?
Oof. I think just over leverage trading back in the day, trading on too high of margin, and then you get liquidated, and just, it sucks. A lot of
Yeah.
us have been there.
What's the most underrated use case of crypto?
That's a great question. I think in the first world countries, in the developed countries, it's just simple payments. Like, we forget. A lot of people criticize Bitcoin. Like, why do we need this? And they totally forget about all these benefits of self custody and being able to send payments without middlemen.
What is your most contrarian take in crypto right now?
So until recently, I would have said it's built on Bitcoin, but that has now become super popular recently. I think my contrarian take now is airdrops are dead. Long live ICOs.
I love it. I love it. Last but not least, what do you think is the biggest risk that still remains for our space? I know we're like at an all-time high euphoria right now, but
Yep,
what do you think is the biggest risk?
it's a great question. I think even though there's been some positive recent developments, of course, I think regulation still remains quite a large risk in terms of, especially around things like developers themselves getting arrested
Yeah,
for
yeah.
deploying code. Like, there's a lot of unanswered questions about how does the law treat smart contracts and autonomous code, and we have to answer the same questions in AI, but that same ambiguity extends to blockchain as well.
Got it. Got it. All right, folks, that's it for today's episode. So again, please check out Legion, check out Matty's Twitter. What's your X handle, by the way? We should shout that out.
Yeah, my X handle is Matty Tokenomics.
Matty Tokenomics,
Yep.
Matty Tokenomics. All right. Until next time. Cheers.
Awesome. Thank you, Marco.